My brother sued me for faking success. Then his lawyer found out who owned his firm. My brother served me with the lawsuit on a Tuesday morning, 9:14 a.m., while the rain was tapping against the kitchen window like fingernails on glass. The envelope came by certified mail, thick, beige, and stiff enough to feel like a brick in my hands. I signed for it in my slippers, carried it to the table, and opened it beside a cup of coffee that had already gone bitter. The first line had my name on it. Claire Reynolds, defendant. I read that line twice before my eyes moved to the one above it. Ethan Reynolds v. Claire Reynolds. Complaint for fraud, misrepresentation, undue influence, conversion of estate assets, and financial exploitation of an elderly person. For a few seconds, the only sound in my house was the refrigerator motor humming behind me. Then I laughed. Not because it was funny. It was the kind of laugh that comes out when reality has been bent so far out of shape that your brain refuses to process it as a threat. My older brother Ethan was suing me for stealing from our dead mother, and according to the complaint, I had manipulated her during the final 14 months of her life to extract $486,000 from her savings. The number was very specific. That was the first mistake. My mother, Margaret Reynolds, had died 18 months earlier at St. Luke's Medical Center in Denver after a short, brutal fight with pancreatic cancer. She had not been rich. She had owned a 2-bedroom ranch house in Lakewood, a 2014 Subaru Forester, one pension account, and a checking account that she balanced by hand with a blue pen every Sunday night. After her funeral, the house sold for $392,000. The mortgage was paid off, final expenses were deducted, and the rest was split between Ethan and me. He received $151,808.72. I received the same. Our mother's attorney, Martin Bell, had handled everything with the kind of dry precision that made him seem less like a lawyer and more like a courthouse clock. He sent copies of every ledger, every receipt, every disbursement, every closing document. There were no missing assets. There were no secret accounts. There was no mysterious $500,000 fortune hidden behind the bread box. There was only Ethan and his appetite. I called Martin before I finished the complaint. He answered on the second ring, and the moment I said my name, he exhaled like a man who had been waiting for bad news to become official. "I saw it," he said. "His attorney sent me a demand letter last week." "You could have warned me." "I wanted to. I also wanted to avoid giving him any argument that I'd interfered before service was complete." The rain clicked against the window. Somewhere down the block, a delivery truck backed up, beeping in slow mechanical intervals. "Is there anything in this?" I asked. "No," Martin said. "Not legally, not factually, not morally. Your mother's estate was clean. You paid for most of her care up front, and she reimbursed you for documented medical expenses. The total was $173,642.19. I have receipts for every dollar. The complaint says I took $486,000. It says a lot of things. That was Martin's way of swearing. I looked at the second page again. Ethan claimed I had lied to Mom about business losses, pretended to be broke, and convinced her to fund a fake investment venture. He claimed I used her illness to isolate her from him. He claimed I fabricated my professional success to hide the fact that I was living on stolen family money. He claimed I was a fraud. I pressed my thumb against the edge of the paper until it cut a thin red line into my skin. "Who is his attorney?" I asked. "Calvin Pierce," Martin said. "Pierce, Walden, and Rowe." I stopped moving. "Say that again." "Pierce, Walden, and Rowe, downtown, 15th Street. The house seemed to go colder, not because of fear, but because of recognition. I knew that firm. I knew its lease structure, its outstanding debt, its partner compensation model, its vendor obligations, and its catastrophic dependence on one expansion fund that had closed 3 months earlier. I knew because I was that fund. Not personally, not on paper anyone at the firm would see in a hallway or a conference room. The investment was routed through Aspen Ridge Capital, then through a special purpose vehicle called ARC Litigation Growth I, LLC. It had been designed that way for privacy, taxes, and clean separation from operational decisions. But the money was mine. $3,750,000. Ethan had hired a law firm to destroy me using my own capital. That was the second mistake. I should explain how a 30-year-old woman in faded sweatpants ended up anonymously backing a law firm in downtown Denver. When I was 22, I graduated from the University of Colorado with a degree in applied mathematics and a job offer from a risk analytics startup that paid less than a dental hygienist. I worked in a room with bad carpet, fluorescent lights, and a coffee maker that smelled permanently burned. For 2 years, I built fraud detection models for community banks that could not afford the expensive software the national banks used. Then I left and built my own. My company was called LedgerLight. It started with 3 people, 2 laptops, and a rented office above a yoga studio in Boulder. We built software that detected hidden financial risk in small business lending portfolios. It was ugly, fast, and accurate. Banks loved it because it saved them money. Regulators loved it because it made audits less painful. I loved it because numbers did not care whether anyone believed in you. Numbers only cared whether you were right. By the time I was 27, LedgerLight had contracts with 43 regional banks, 2 credit unions, and 1 insurance company that paid invoices exactly 37 days late every month. A financial technology company in Austin acquired us for $74 million. After taxes, investor payouts, employee bonuses, and legal costs, my personal share came to $28.6 million. I did not buy a mansion. I did not buy a white Range Rover or a diamond watch or a vacation house in Aspen. I paid off my student loans, paid off Mom's medical bills when the insurance gap started widening, bought a boring townhome in Wash Park, and hired a wealth manager who did not use the word lifestyle in our first meeting. Then I started investing quietly. Quiet money lasts longer. Ethan never understood that. My brother was 4 years older than me, and he had always treated adulthood like a showroom. He sold medical equipment, leased a black Mercedes he could not afford, posted steakhouse dinners on Instagram, and once told me that wealth did not count unless people could see it. At Mom's funeral, he wore a cashmere coat and asked whether the valet at the church was complimentary. I wore a navy dress from Nordstrom Rack. He looked at me like I had failed. Ethan knew I had sold a company. He did not know for how much. I had told Mom because she asked once, gently, while we sat in her kitchen after her first round of chemo. I told her the truth. She put her hand over mine and said, "Then don't let it turn you into someone loud." I promised her it wouldn't. I kept that promise. During her illness, I took leave from my board work, drove her to appointments, slept in the recliner beside her hospital bed, and paid invoices before she could worry about them. When she felt well enough, she insisted on reimbursing me from her own accounts. I told her not to. She told me she was still my mother, not my dependent. So I kept receipts. Every ambulance bill, every oncology copay, every home health invoice, every pharmacy charge, every $18.44 bottle of nausea medication from the Walgreens on Wadsworth. I scanned them, labeled them, backed them up in 3 places, and sent copies to Martin. That was not paranoia. That was training. People think finance is about money. It is not. Finance is about behavior under pressure. People show you who they are when the ledger stops flattering them. Ethan had shown me. I hired my own attorney the same afternoon. Her name was Rachel Voss, and she came from a litigation firm that occupied the top 2 floors of a building where even the elevator smelled expensive. Her office smelled like lemon polish and paper. Not printer paper, real paper. Thick files, signed orders, exhibits, tabbed binders, things that could survive a judge's bad mood. Rachel read the complaint without speaking. When she finished, she placed it flat on the table and aligned the corners with her fingertips. "This is aggressive," she said. "It's fiction. Fiction can still cost 6 figures to disprove." "I know." She looked up. "You understand his goal?" "Settlement." "Yes. He wants the case ugly enough that you pay him to go away. He picked the wrong sister. Rachel's mouth moved half an inch. For her, that was a smile. Over the next 3 weeks, we built the first binder. Rachel called it our defensive file. I called it the red binder because I bought it myself from Office Depot at 7:42 p.m. on a Thursday and chose red because Mom had used red folders for tax documents. It had 12 sections: estate closing records, medical invoices, bank transfer logs, caregiver contracts, pharmacy receipts, insurance explanations of benefits, my tax returns, the Ledger Light sale documents, charitable contribution records, board compensation statements, sworn statements from Mom's doctors, and a timeline of Ethan's visits. His timeline was short: 4 visits in 14 months, 1 diagnosis visit, 1 birthday lunch where he stayed 32 minutes, 1 hospital visit where he took a phone call in the hallway for most of the time, 1 final visit 3 days before she died, when Mom was already too medicated to hold a full conversation. He spent more time photographing his car outside the hospital than sitting beside her bed. I did not put that in the binder. Rachel did. The first hearing was scheduled for May 11 at 8:30 a.m. in Denver District Court. The courthouse smelled like wet wool, floor wax, and old coffee. The hallway lights buzzed overhead with a tired electrical sound, and every few minutes, a clerk's cart rattled across the tile like loose bones. Ethan arrived at 8:17. He wore a gray suit, a silver tie, and the expression of a man who believed the building had been constructed for his vindication. Calvin Pierce walked beside him, taller, smoother, all cufflinks and controlled contempt. He had the kind of face that looked sympathetic only when billing hourly. Rachel stood beside me, holding nothing but a legal pad. The red binder was in my bag. Calvin opened the hearing by describing me as a financially opaque individual who had cultivated an appearance of modesty while engaging in unexplained high-value transactions. He said my lifestyle was inconsistent with my visible income. He said my mother had been vulnerable. He said discovery would reveal the full scope of my deception. Then he said something that made Rachel's pen stop moving. Ms. Reynolds has never produced reliable proof of the business success she claims. The room went very still. Rachel stood. Your Honor, we have produced the acquisition agreement, IRS filings, wire confirmations, audited financial statements, and third-party closing records. Plaintiff's counsel received them on April 22nd at 3:16 p.m. via secure portal, and the download log shows Mr. Pierce's office accessed them from IP address 198.51.44.72 at 3:41 p.m. Calvin blinked once. Judge Marianne Holt looked over her glasses. Mr. Pierce? Calvin smiled thinly. Your Honor, we do not concede the authenticity of documents produced unilaterally by the defendant. They came from the acquiring company's counsel, Rachel said, and the IRS transcript came directly from the IRS. The judge turned another page. Mr. Pierce, do you have evidence supporting the $486,000 figure? We have circumstantial indicators. That is not what I asked. The air conditioner kicked on above us with a dry, mechanical cough. Calvin shifted. We have bank transfers totaling approximately $174,000. Approximately? The judge asked. $173,642.19, Rachel said. All reimbursements for medical expenses. Every invoice is in Exhibit C. Judge Holt read silently for 23 seconds. I counted. Ethan stared at me from the plaintiff's table, his jaw tight enough to crack a tooth. The judge did not dismiss the case that morning. Judges do not always end nonsense as quickly as movies do. She allowed limited discovery, restricted to alleged transfers and communications involving Mom's finances during the final 14 months of her life. But before she ended the hearing, she looked at Calvin and said, Counsel, if this case becomes a fishing expedition, I will sanction it like one. Calvin nodded. Ethan smirked. He thought he had survived. That was the third mistake. Discovery is a strange thing. People imagine it as boxes of dramatic evidence and surprise witnesses. In reality, it is mostly spreadsheets, metadata, timestamps, and people forgetting that PDFs remember things humans don't. Rachel requested Ethan's evidence supporting the missing money. Calvin produced 3 promissory notes allegedly signed by our mother, each stating that she had advanced me money for a private investment fund. The notes were dated November 3, December 19, and February 8. Mom had been hospitalized on all 3 dates. On November 3, she was in room 412 at St. Luke's receiving fluids after a chemo reaction. On December 19th, she was sedated after a bile duct stent procedure. On February 8th, she was in hospice, unable to sign anything more complex than a medication consent form, and even that had required a nurse witness. The signatures looked like hers at first glance. At second glance, they looked like a son trying to remember how his mother wrote the letter M. Rachel sent them to a forensic document examiner in Colorado Springs named Helen Armitage. Helen was 71, wore turquoise glasses, and had the calmest voice I had ever heard. She examined ink pressure, tremor patterns, stroke sequence, indentation marks, and printer history. Her preliminary report came back 9 days later. The signatures were traced. Not copied, traced. That mattered. A copied signature can be explained as clerical laziness. A traced signature suggests intention. Helen found microscopic hesitation points at the curve of the R in Reynolds and abnormal stop-start pressure at the end of Margaret. Worse for Ethan, one document contained faint indentation marks from another sheet of paper placed above it during tracing. The source appeared to be Mom's 2021 Christmas card list. I remembered that list. She kept it in the kitchen drawer under the oven mitts. Rachel also subpoenaed email records related to the documents. That was when the case stopped being a family dispute and started smelling like federal trouble. The promissory notes had been emailed from Ethan's personal account to Calvin Pierce's office on March 7th at 11:38 p.m. The attached PDF metadata showed they had been created using a trial version of a document editing program registered to ER Sales Laptop. The IP address traced to Ethan's home router in Highlands Ranch. The printer ID embedded in the scan matched an HP OfficeJet registered under his wife's Amazon account. Then came the tax issue. One of the fake notes described the alleged money as an investment advance into a fund that did not exist. Another characterized it as a family loan. But Ethan had also reported, through his attorney, that Mom had made taxable gifts to me exceeding the annual exclusion limit and that I had concealed them. Calvin's office had sent a copy of that allegation to a contact at the Colorado Department of Revenue as a pressure tactic. Pressure tactics have consequences. Rachel pulled federal transcripts to prove no such gifts existed. In doing so, she discovered that someone had attempted to access Mom's IRS online account 7 months after her death. The login attempt used her social security number, date of birth, and an old email address. It failed because the system required identity verification, but the attempt generated an alert. The IP address was familiar. Ethan's router again. Rachel did not smile when she showed me. She simply slid the paper across her conference table. Outside her window, downtown traffic moved in cold silver lines. Inside, the only sound was the soft hiss of the HVAC vent and the distant ring of someone else's phone. "Claire," she said, "this is no longer just defamation or frivolous litigation." "I know. Your brother may have forged documents and attempted to access a deceased person's federal tax account." "I know. Do you want to give him a chance to withdraw before this goes further?" I thought about Mom in room 412, pretending the broth did not taste metallic. I thought about Ethan standing beside her hospital bed, checking his watch while she tried to ask about his kids. I thought about the complaint calling me a predator when I had been the one cleaning medication spills from her nightstand at 2 a.m. "No," I said. Rachel nodded once. We began preparing the second binder. This one was blue. The blue binder was not for court only. It contained the forensic signature report, hospital admission records, hospice notes, PDF metadata, email logs, IP trace summaries, printer identification data, IRS access alert, and a sworn declaration from Martin Bell confirming the estate had closed cleanly. It also contained a section I had not expected to use: the investment documents for Pierce, Walden, and Rowe. Rachel raised an eyebrow when I handed them over. "You invested in his firm?" Anonymously. "How much?" $3.75 million. She took off her glasses. For the first time since I met her, Rachel looked genuinely entertained. "Of course you did." The investment agreement had a morality and adverse interest clause. If the firm engaged in conduct that exposed ARC Litigation Growth 1 to reputational harm, material legal risk, or undisclosed financial instability, the investor had the right to withdraw remaining committed capital and accelerate repayment obligations within 10 business days. It was not written for this situation specifically. Good contracts rarely are. They are written for human nature. I did not trigger the clause immediately. Rachel advised waiting until the public record was clear enough that no one could argue I was using capital as retaliation for ordinary litigation. I agreed. Discipline is doing nothing while the trap finishes building itself. So I waited, and I let Ethan think I was scared. 2 weeks before the evidentiary hearing, Ethan called me from a steakhouse bathroom. I knew because I could hear restaurant music, muffled voices, and the echo of tile around him. He had the relaxed arrogance of a man 3 drinks into someone else's confidence. "You should settle," he said. "No." "Claire, don't be stupid. Calvin says once the judge sees the notes, this gets ugly for you." "The notes. You know what I mean." I looked at the blue binder on my desk. The tabs were aligned perfectly. The cover smelled faintly like plastic and toner. "I'm sure I do." "You always thought you were better than me," Ethan said. "You and your little math trophies and your quiet little superiority act. Mom bought it. Dad bought it before he died. Everybody bought it. But I see you." There it was, the real complaint. Not fraud, not elder abuse, not inheritance. Just a man standing in a steakhouse bathroom, furious that his sister's silence had become more threatening than his performance. "I hope you enjoy court," I said. He laughed. "I will." He hung up. The evidentiary hearing was held on June 6th at 10 a.m. Judge Holt's courtroom smelled like varnished wood and stale coffee. The ceiling lights made every face look slightly tired. Ethan arrived with Calvin Pierce and 2 junior associates carrying exhibit boxes like pallbearers. I arrived with Rachel and 1 red binder. The blue binder stayed in Rachel's case bag. That was intentional. Calvin called Ethan first. My brother sat in the witness chair, raised his right hand, and swore to tell the truth. His voice was clear. His tie was blue. His shoes were polished so brightly they reflected the courtroom lights. He lied beautifully. He testified that Mom had confided in him about substantial transfers to me. He testified that she had been worried I was using her money irresponsibly. He testified that he found the promissory notes in a box of her papers after her death. He testified that he had no reason to doubt their authenticity. Rachel wrote 1 sentence on her legal pad. Let him finish. Calvin introduced the first promissory note, then the second, then the third. He spoke slowly, dramatically, as if placing bricks in the foundation of a building that did not exist. Judge Holt accepted them provisionally. Ethan looked at me. I looked at the clock. 10:47 a.m. Rachel stood for cross-examination. "Mr. Reynolds, you testified that you found these notes in your mother's papers. Where specifically?" "In a storage box." "What room?" "Her bedroom." "What date?" "I don't remember exactly." "Was it before or after March 7th?" He blinked. "I don't know." Rachel picked up a folder. "Do you recognize this email?" Calvin stood. "Objection. Foundation." "I'll lay it," Rachel said. She did. Slowly. Calmly. By the time she finished, the courtroom had seen Ethan's March 7th email, the attached PDFs, the metadata from the editing software, the printer ID, and the IP log connecting the upload to his home network. Calvin's face had gone from confident to pale to something harder. calculation. Ethan stopped looking at me. Rachel placed the hospital records beside the notes. Mr. Reynolds, on November 3rd, the date of this first alleged note, your mother was admitted to St. Luke's Medical Center, correct? I don't know her exact hospital dates. Rachel handed him the admission record. Now you do. The judge looked up. Rachel continued. On December 19th, the date of the second note, she underwent a procedure and was sedated. On February 8th, the date of the third note, she was in hospice care with documented motor impairment. Are you asking this court to believe she executed 3 financial documents on 3 dates, when medical records show she could not have done so normally? Ethan swallowed. I found them. That wasn't my question. I said I found them. Rachel opened the blue binder. The room changed. It is hard to describe that kind of silence. It was not empty. It was full of everyone realizing the story they had been watching was not the story being told. Rachel called Helen Armitage, the forensic document examiner. Helen wore a charcoal jacket and spoke with the patience of a woman who had spent 50 years letting ink betray people. She explained traced signatures, pressure hesitations, indentation marks, and source signature alignment. She did not raise her voice once. She did not need to. By 11:36 a.m., the promissory notes were dying on the record. Then, Rachel introduced the IRS access alert. Calvin objected so quickly his chair scraped the floor. The sound cracked through the courtroom. Judge Holt asked counsel to approach. They spoke in low voices near the bench, while Ethan sat frozen, fingers locked together, knuckles whitening. I could smell his cologne from 10 feet away. Too much cedar, too late. Judge Holt allowed limited questioning. Rachel established only the basics. Someone attempted to access Margaret Reynolds' IRS online account after her death using identifying information. The attempt came from the same residential IP address associated with Ethan's submitted documents, and the matter had been referred for further review. She did not say federal crime. She did not have to. Judges hear words that are not spoken. At 12:08 p.m., Judge Holt removed her glasses and looked at Calvin. Mr. Pierce, did your firm verify the authenticity of these promissory notes before filing allegations of fraud and elder exploitation? Calvin's throat moved. We relied on our client's representations. That is not an answer I enjoy hearing when forged documents may have been presented to this court. The courtroom temperature seemed to drop. Judge Holt continued. I am ordering supplemental briefing on sanctions. I am also directing the clerk to transmit today's record to the district attorney's office for review. As to the potential tax account access issue, counsel may expect appropriate referral channels to be notified. Ethan turned his head toward Calvin. Calvin did not look back. That was when my brother finally understood. He had not brought me to court. He had brought himself. The lawsuit was dismissed with prejudice 8 days later. The order was 12 pages long and dry enough to sandwood. Judge Holt found the claims unsupported by credible evidence, the promissory notes materially unreliable, and the plaintiff's litigation conduct sanctionable. Ethan was ordered to pay a portion of my attorney's fees, $82,400. It was not the worst part of his week. The day after the dismissal, Rachel sent Pierce, Walden, and Rowe formal notice on behalf of ARC Litigation Growth 1. The letter cited Section 9.4, Adverse Interest Conduct, Section 11.2, Reputational Risk, Section 14.1, Accelerated Repayment, and Section 16.7, Investor Withdrawal Rights. It demanded return of remaining committed capital and froze the next tranche of funding scheduled for July 1st. At 2:22 p.m., Calvin Pierce called Rachel. Rachel put him on speaker with my permission. His voice was different now. Not arrogant, not humble either, just stripped down to need. Rachel, this is disproportionate. No, Rachel said. It is contractual. We didn't know your client controlled ARC. You didn't know because you didn't perform due diligence. This will destroy the expansion. Then the expansion was undercapitalized. There was a pause. Then Calvin said, What does she want? Rachel looked at me. I said nothing. Rachel answered, "She wants nothing from you. The investor is exercising its rights." By Friday, the downtown legal community was already feeding on the news. Pierce, Walden & Rowe had leased 2 additional floors based on projected investor funding. They had hired 6 attorneys, signed vendor contracts, purchased a new litigation software package, and announced a commercial disputes division they could no longer afford. Their landlord demanded assurances. Their bank froze a credit increase. 2 lateral partners asked for written proof of solvency. Calvin did not have it. By Monday, 3 clients moved their files. By Wednesday, the first associate resigned. By the following week, Pierce, Walden & Rowe was no longer a firm. It was a cautionary tale with letterhead. Ethan called me 12 times during those 2 weeks. I did not answer until the 13th, because Mom had believed 13 was lucky, and because I wanted him to sit with the sound of his own choices first. When I answered, he did not say hello. "You ruined me." I was standing in my kitchen, washing a coffee mug. The afternoon light hit the counter in a clean rectangle. "No," I said. "I documented you." "You destroyed Calvin's firm." "I withdrew from an investment that became legally and reputationally unsafe." "Because of me." "Because of forged documents submitted in a lawsuit against me." He breathed hard into the phone. "You always do this. You use words to make yourself sound innocent." "I use records." "You think you're better than me." "No, I think I kept receipts." That stopped him. For a moment, there was only silence and the faint buzz of the line. Then his voice cracked, not into tears, but into something smaller and uglier than anger. "I needed the money." There it was. Not justice, not Mom, not inheritance. Money. "My cards are maxed," he said. "The Mercedes is 3 months behind. Jenna doesn't know about half the debt. When Mom died and the house didn't bring what I thought it would, I panicked. Then I started thinking maybe you had gotten more. You were always paying for everything. The hospital, the nurses, the prescriptions. I thought there had to be something hidden." "You could have asked." "You would have judged me." "I am judging you now." He inhaled sharply. "You forged Mom's name, Ethan." "I traced it from an old card," he whispered. The confession was so quiet it almost disappeared. I closed my eyes. For the first time since the lawsuit arrived, I felt something close to grief. Not for the case, not for the money, for the fact that my brother had sat somewhere in his expensive house, taken our mother's handwriting from a Christmas card, and pressed it into a lie. That was the part I would never forgive quickly. Maybe not ever. "I'm sorry," he said. "No," I said. "You're cornered." He said nothing. "The district attorney may contact you. The IRS issue may not disappear. The sanctions order is already entered. I can't undo that, and I wouldn't if I could." "Claire, please." "There was a moment when you could have stopped. Before filing, before submitting the notes, before testifying. You passed every exit." His breathing shook. I hung up. 6 months later, Ethan pleaded guilty in state court to 1 count related to forged instruments as part of a negotiated agreement. The federal tax access issue did not become a long prison story like people expect in online revenge fantasies, but it did become expensive, humiliating, and permanent. He received probation, restitution obligations, community service, and a record that followed him into every job interview afterward. Calvin Pierce was sanctioned by Judge Holt and referred to the state disciplinary office. He did not lose his license, but he lost something lawyers fear more in private, the assumption that his judgment could be trusted. His partners dissolved the firm. The 2 lateral hires sued over misrepresentation of financial stability. The lease default made the business pages for 1 short, brutal paragraph. That was enough. Ethan sold the Mercedes, then the house, then the version of himself that needed both to exist. We did not speak for almost a year. When we finally met, it was not at a steakhouse or a courtroom or one of those dramatic places people imagine for reconciliation. It was at a diner off Colfax Avenue where the coffee tasted burned and the vinyl booths had cracks taped over with black strips. Ethan looked older, not wiser exactly, just sanded down. He brought a manila envelope. For a second, I almost laughed at the poetry of it. Inside were copies of his debt plan, proof of restitution payments, and a handwritten letter. He did not ask for money. He did not ask me to call anyone. He did not ask me to say everything was okay. He only said, "I hated you because I thought your quiet meant you were hiding something from me. I know now it meant you were protecting your peace." I read the letter twice. Then I folded it and put it back in the envelope. "I don't trust you," I said. "I know." "I don't know when I will." "I know." "But I'm glad you're paying what you owe." His eyes filled, but he did not perform. That mattered more than an apology speech. For once, my brother let silence do the work. We drank bad coffee for 20 minutes. Then I left. I am 31 now. I still live in the same townhome. I still drive a gray Subaru with a dent near the back bumper that I keep forgetting to fix. My portfolio is larger than it was when Ethan sued me, but my life is quieter, not louder. I fund startups, sit on boards, and mentor founders who remind me of the tired 22-year-old version of myself who once believed success would finally make people stop underestimating her. It doesn't. Success only changes the price of being underestimated. My mother understood that before I did. She knew that dignity does not need witnesses, and peace does not need applause. She taught me to keep clean records, clean hands, and a clean exit. So that is what I did. When my brother accused me of stealing from our mother, I did not scream. When his attorney called me a fraud, I did not perform outrage. When they dragged forged documents into a courtroom, I opened a binder and let the paper speak. Paper has a beautiful voice. It does not shake. It does not forget. And when people build lies on assumptions, paper knows exactly where to place the weight.